Well, we've had an opportunity to visit here in Anchorage, up in the valley, and to see firsthand the impacts from the 7.0 earthquake that we had on Friday. This is an opportunity for us to not only listen to those who've been impacted, understand the assessment so that we can go back to Washington, D.C. and work with our federal agencies, work with FEMA and those who will be helpful in the after action, how we're going to fund some of the repairs that we have seen, whether it is the infrastructure with the roads, whether it is the impact to our schools, the assistance that will come to individuals as they've seen losses within their homes. One thing that has been really extraordinary as we've had this tour today is to see the extent of the damage that we have had in certain places and to appreciate that we have had no casualty, very little injury, and it really does speak, I think, to the level of preparedness that we put in place as Alaskans. I think it speaks to the strength of our building codes that we've put in place for the past 40, 50 years since the 64 earthquake. And it reminds me, I think, certainly of the resilience that we have as Alaskans. There's kind of an attitude out there of, well, some things are broken and we're moving to fix them up. And we're all going to be doing this together. So it's a very important trip today, and we've got a lot of work back in Washington, but it's good to know that the men and women and the resources that have come together to assist have joined in such an extraordinary fashion.
And I would emphasize the professionalism that we've seen at all levels, and I mean at all levels. First responders, state, local, federal, everybody coming together, utility workers, Department of Transportation workers, and the professionalism of the students. We had the opportunity to tour the middle school in Houston, and this school has been really devastated. Cinder block pieces coming down, raining down on these kids, and yet the stories we've been hearing about how professional even our young students were in terms of, it's really a miracle in many ways that we had no fatalities or serious injuries, and I think that's we should all be thankful for that. One other point that I just wanted to emphasize, and Senator Murkowski and I and Congressman Young have been working on this, but the positive and almost immediate response that we received upon people in Washington hearing about the earthquake from everybody from the President, Vice President, Secretary of Transportation, the FEMA administrator, and our Senate colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, immediately reaching out saying, hey, whatever we can do to help. I think that we just want to deliver that message for our fellow Alaskans, because of course people have gone through a lot of trauma. There's still obviously going to be a lot of challenges, frustrations, but the reaction we had back in DC to get help for us was really strong, and I think it's important for people to know that.
So, Senators, Governor Walker spoke about the Transportation Secretary. He got three or four calls, he said, from Argentina, from the President. There's been a lot of reaction. How does that translate into any kind of benefit, resources for Alaskans in terms of either infrastructure, either for government buildings or highways, or individuals or businesses? What is that? Can you say? Do you know?
Well, and my initial reaction is that it should and it will. Rich, we've had a lot of, in the last year and a half for the country, a number of major disasters and hurricanes, the fires, and there have been several previously bills that have done disaster relief. None of them have impacted Alaska. I think Senator Murkowski and I can speak for myself, some of those are big numbers, and I typically have voted for those because as Alaskans, we know in many ways, but for the grace of God, go us in terms of these kind of disasters, particularly given where we live with regard to earthquake zone part of the world. So I think there'll be likely strong support as we come back, working with everybody here on the assessments of what we need to come back to the Congress and to the administration and ask for the appropriate level of support.
And to follow on, I think the fact that that FEMA sent the second in command, Peter Gaynor, who was up here to see for himself, to understand what it is that we already have on the ground and what it is that we need to supplement. And I think one of the takeaways that I have certainly heard is that FEMA has been pretty impressed with what we have in place in Alaska. We have the Alaska-based FEMA team, but we have our own state emergency management team that, whether it was the Sockeye fire, or whether it was the Galena floods, they are well trained, they're resourceful, and they have had to be pretty independent. We don't get the volunteers just driving across state lines to come and help. We've had to build our own integrated emergency management teams, and we've figured out how to piece the state, the federal, the local, and how we work all that. And we've had some practice with that. And so for them to see what we are able to do, I think is important. For the outside resources to know when and where to be helpful is also important. One of the things that I have been reminding folks as we've met with them today, whether it's those at the local governance level or otherwise, is we will be advancing a disaster supplemental measure in these next couple weeks. We'll vote it out of the Congress. That disaster sub will relate to the hurricanes from 2018. It will not account for the fires in California, and it won't count for the Alaska earthquake here. That will come in January. And so as we gather the assessment, as we better understand the impact, the financial impact, and what it is that we need, we don't need to hurry up quick, just throw a number out there just to get a number out there because Congress is ending. We do have time. We do need to take the time to do a fair and accurate assessment. We don't want to understate the significance and the financial cost of this.
And money in some of this might take a little bit more time to manifest itself in terms of what the state actually needs. That was kind of a common theme we heard in all of our meetings today. And our message back was, hey, we of course we want to get funding soon, but take your time to get it right, to get it accurate, because we'll probably have one shot, a good shot to do it, and we want to be accurate. We certainly don't want to lowball any estimations off the top, right off the bat. So that was our message today to a number of officials we met with here in Anchorage and in the Valley.
Do you think that it helps that there's no known climate change connection between an earthquake disaster and what happened, as opposed to like the California fires, where there are allegations of climate change and hurricanes?
I think a disaster is a disaster. And whether it is one that has been manifested when Mother Nature is relieving a little bit of pressure under there, or whether it is the fires that have been intensified by the drought and the beetle infestation and the factors that have led to these consequential fires. A disaster is a disaster, and we respond. And that's what I think we need to be focusing on.
And you do see a coming together in the Congress on these disasters where pretty much everybody recognizes, hey, that could be my constituents someday. And so I think most members of the Senate, clearly, regardless of party, when they see that kind of suffering and that kind of, like, for example, these wildfires out in California, I mean, they lost dozens of lives. And again, we're in some ways very blessed. You know, a lot of people are struggling, a lot of people are frustrated, a lot of people are nervous, but we can rebuild roads. It's a much better situation where we don't have to be burying people right now.
Senators, from what you saw today, what was the thing that stood out the most from what you saw from the damage from the quake?
In terms of just kind of the destruction of it, I think for me, to stand there at Vine Road and look down into these big crevasses of concrete, having seen the pictures and seen it from the air, and then to be down there next to it was pretty raw. What was gut-wrenching for me was to be at the middle school out there in Houston, to stand in the library with just the books just trashed on the floor, to walk down the hallway and see the panels and the exposure and the cinder blocks and the steel, and to imagine what it was like for a 12-year-old child at 8:30 in the morning when it's still dark out. The power has surged and it might be dark in the school, and the crashing sounds of the noise, and yet throughout all of that chaos, you had children, who, as Senator Sullivan indicated, were they knew what to do. They'd had the training, duck and cover, get under your desk. The children had the calmness to not only take care of themselves, but to take care of others. The teachers knew to be that calm presence, knew to follow the order to evacuate that school. And when you try to place yourself in that position as you look at the destruction around you, and to think that these are children all over the district here, out in the valley, here in the Anchorage School District, knowing what they have gone through, and again, the training that they have had, but no injury, no loss of life. One child here in the Anchorage School District had a sprained or broken wrist, I believe it was, as he tried to shield a ceiling panel from striking him. But beyond that, it's pretty extraordinary. So I know that I'm going back to Washington tomorrow morning with this gut-wrenching image of that school, and thinking about those kids and how we can be more resilient in a place where you cannot predict with any degree of certainty what may come our way.
And I would say, similar to that, when we are in these different rooms, the gym, the music room, the library, and each time we went in, these rooms are destroyed. I mean, they are trashed. And the question we were asking each time were there students here?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, this gym, this music room, this library was packed with students, and yet they all got out. The other image that I was left with today, again, it goes to the Alaskan idea of resilience. A number of the big roads that we saw on the Glen Highway and other areas, they're already almost not fully rebuilt, but getting darn close. And this is an earthquake that's 96 hours old, and yet people working hard and getting out there and making things happen. It's pretty remarkable. So again, I know there's a lot of people who are still suffering. One of the questions that we've had that we're very focused on is, well, what about a business that was destroyed? What about a home that's had major structural damage? There are programs, state and federal, that we are going to be making sure there's coordination on, try to make sure those are fully funded to make sure we get help to those individuals as well.
Correct me if I'm wrong, you said that you're going to be advancing a bill for disaster relief for the hurricane? and then in 2019, perhaps dealing with the California fires and the earthquake here. Hopefully not, but in the event there is a government shutdown, how is that queue affected?
So the disaster supplemental is something that we will advance prior to the end of the 115th Congress. So I am not one who thinks that we will have a shutdown. I certainly hope not. It's the worst thing that we can possibly do, earthquake or no earthquake. But we will advance disaster supplemental as part of the finish-up work for this Congress, so that will be sometime between now and Christmas. So in the event of a shutdown for maybe a very short period of time, if the wheels fall off the bus and we're not able to do that, it would just be delayed a little bit. But usually the disaster supplementals are things that come right at the very, very tail end anyway. So we would advance that. But then again, it's important to remember that we have disasters in this country that we must find the resources to help address. And so we will be addressing some of what we've seen with the fires in California and the Alaska quake as well in 19. Okay?
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thanks for
All
coming
right,
out.
thanks.
Thank you,
Okay.
Senator.
Yeah.
I
Here.
want you ripping your coat.
Well, no, I just usually pop the tops off all of your nice equipment here.
Wait, you? That's
Here.
your, okay.
There you go.
There we go.
You guys have a lot to cover today. Between the
It's been
governor, did you guys all go up north?
We had, that was a different group.
We had to
Okay.
go up